Okay, you are the host.
Okay, back to here. Okay, can everyone see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay.
Nope.
No.
No.
No. Okay, I think I have to share it again. Let's see.
Now it's there.
That's there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the second slide. And what is it we're supposed to do as ward emergency preparedness specialists? There are kind of two buckets. One I'd call administrative, and the other call operations. So as we go through this, think about what part of this is actually laying the foundation from an administrative standpoint, and what is actually I'm doing something else that's related to an emergency or a drill. So first of all, you're sort of the instigator, coordinator, director, if you will, of all things related to emergency preparedness, but you have a team of folks who you work with, called the Ward Council, Elders Quorum President, Relief Society President, Bishopric. So anyway, you coordinate the neighborhood disaster drills, and includes the preparation, reporting, and post-drill evaluation. So leading up to a disaster or drill, you're sort of the leader, helping everyone get ready. And then during that drill or during a disaster, you're the person who's overseeing the reporting. And then after a drill, you do a post-drill evaluation to see, did what we do during the drill, was it effective? Was it organized? Was it successful, or where do we need to improve? So next, in coordination with the bishopric, activate the Emergency Operations Center and serve as the center manager. We talked about the other night, not all of you were there. I think there are a couple of you who weren't there back on the, whatever date it was, 2 Thursdays ago, where we went over what the Operations Center is. It's in the emergency response plan, so you can read in detail about that. It's basically the hub of operations during a disaster and during a drill, from which information comes in and effort goes out to assist. So, but you coordinate that with the bishopric, and the bishop actually pulls the plug on pulls the trigger on the activating the Emergency Operations Center. And you serve as the manager. So with the bishopric, you activate that and you serve as the manager of that EOC. You maintain an EOC kit. There's instructions about that in the emergency response plan, but that kit is basically a tub full of materials. Consider during emergency, you may not have internet connections. You may not be able to operate your computer, your telephone, or other things. So there are blank copies of reports in there, area captains, checklists, ham and GMRS radio, call signals, and assigned channels and frequencies, so that when all the rest of the world fails, you're still able to do what we need to do to bring assistance where needed. You receive the area captain's reports and communicate the needs upward to the bishoprics during an emergency or drill. And during an emergency, you maintain contact with the area captains and continue to relay assessments to the bishopric, the Elders Quorum President, Relief Society President, because they are the ones who are going to have their hands on the bishop's storehouse, or the Lord's storehouse. And the Lord's storehouse includes all of the financial resources, manpower resources that the members can bring to bear in any given emergency. So you work with Bishop and the stake presidency, set up areas for first aid, emergency shelter, communications, evacuation assembly if needed. Let's pray that we never need to do this, but even if we don't need to do it, we need to be ready in case something happens. So this is this emergency response plan is planning in the case that we need to execute. So I think I missed the whole first slide, but I'll go backwards here. You work with the Ward Council to promote, improve neighborhood self-reliance and emergency preparedness. So that could be water, it could be food, could be financial. Do I have cash on hand? Do I have a 144-hour emergency preparedness kit? Do I have a source of energy that I can maintain the stuff that I have refrigerated or frozen, or ability to cook? Do I have the medications that are needed? And then so you're the promoter. You're the promoter of those things. And in working with a ward council, you can figure out how best to do that promotion. You receive and execute instructions from the bishopric. You regularly encourage members and neighbors to engage in preparedness efforts. You can do that through seminars, through workshops, through printed information, ward bulletins, ward websites, those kinds of things. Like, I'm going to be kind of the person in your face for preparedness. That's kind of what you're doing. You're kind of the person that everybody recognizes in the ward, that when they need to know something about emergency preparedness, they're going to come to you. So your role is to be visible, to be proactive, and to assist. Because when people aren't ready, then the resources get strained in trying to help people who haven't adequately prepared. So the better prepared we are, the more self-reliant we can be, and the less resources it would take from everyone else to support those who may not be as prepared as they should be. You work with the elders, quorum president, relief society presidents, divide the ward into areas, and you prepare and maintain a map of those areas. So you're all familiar with that. You recommend and you train and backfill area captains and alternates. Maintain regular contact with the area captains. So if we're having a drill and in between, let they be in contact with area captains. And if an area captain doesn't desire to be in that role any longer, you'll need to backfill that. Or if they're out of town during a drill or during an emergency, you'll need to, assess what's going on in their particular area. So there needs to be some way to backfill for them if they're not available. So when possible, maintain a current ham or GMRS radio license. Whether Badger's going to talk more about that, and regularly participate in network tests. So you may be thinking, I don't know anything about a ham radio. I don't know anything about GMRS radio, but GMRS is pretty easy, and you can get there in probably pretty short order. But anyway, I'll skip over that, and Sister Badger can talk more about that. You recommend and you train the emergency communication specialist and the alternate. So in each ward, where possible, there should be an emergency communication specialist. He or she are going to be the lead person on the ham radio and the GMRS radio. But when that slot is vacant, you need to be able to backfill that so that there is communication upward and sideways during an emergency. In a real life emergency, you may not be able to go anywhere, but you need to be able to talk with somebody and communicate what the needs are as assessed by the area. The area, lacking the word now, area captains, yeah. And then the last slide is in conjunction with the annual emergency response drill, organize the critical skills and equipment survey and continue to seek participation in perpetuity. So the input into the critical skills and equipment survey never ends until you've got everybody in the ward or neighborhood signed up. So what we need to know in that case is, who's a nurse, who's a doctor, who has a chainsaw, who has a snowplow, who's an electrician, those kinds of things, all part of the Lord's storehouse, so that we can call upon those people in time of need, and we know where they are and they know what they've got, and we know how to reach them. So anyway, we've had that survey done. We got participation of about 23 24%, maybe 26%. I forget the number, but we'd like to get that up to at least 50% or more. So we'd ask you to continue to push that and invite people to participate. So that's, I'll take a minute for questions. We'll have a little bit of question and answer at the end. Any questions? If it seems a little bit overwhelming, let's take it a step at a time, not try to eat the whole elephant, but in one sitting, but take it a step at a time. And some things will work together as a stake on them, on the activities. So I think that's it, and I will turn it over to Brother Swafford. So,
Thanks, Brother Pettit.
you're welcome.
I would just, we've all been in this space for a while now, and I have these props left over from my former iterations as an area captain, as a communications specialist. And I'm talking about area captains tonight. Administration is critical. So President Goetz and Brother Pettit and Brother Fuller, and you, because you're the administration at the ward level, are critical. But what we've learned from the Russian invasion is that it doesn't really matter how well prepared the administrations and the generals think they are. It's the commitment of the people on the ground that win or lose the war. And those are the area captains. And so rather than being a calling that you just fill with somebody who needs a calling, working with the Elders Quorum president and Relief Society presidency to get approved through the bishop who these people are going to be is critical. And we found that in the past that maybe calling couples is a good idea because they complement each other's skill sets generally. And it's an attempt to, as you modify, go through that list and evaluate what you need to do in terms of organizing area captains, think about couples. And as was already mentioned by Brother Pettit, we don't even know what's going to happen. In the case of an emergency, half those people could be not around and not usable to you. So I would get the area captains to start thinking about what volunteers they could use to cover vacancies and to backfill those spots in the event of an emergency. And you can think about who those people are. It might be people that need to be people that you're comfortable with and could call in a pinch. You know who they are in your area that are dependable. A new factor, almost all this information is of course, in the stake emergency plan, but kind of an issue that we think is important that you might want to implement in your area is you ought to interact with your area captains at least quarterly. It prevents them from feeling like they're a once a year calling. It keeps them up to date, whether you get the new EOC kit for your ward and have a quick fifth Sunday discussion in your ward, or you involve them in a street barbecue in the summer, whatever it is that keeps that group of area captains at least once a quarter involved in some activity. They can distribute materials, they can help prepare materials, organize stuff, do a check on the cards. I know you'll invent and come up with great ways that they can continue to stay involved quarterly. So then the question comes, well, who does really what when an emergency happens? Well, since we've already been through the list in the last meeting of possible emergencies that occur, I won't go through that again, but when you think about it, what really happens is that the area captains go around their area quickly and take a survey of the status, the RDAP of everybody in their neighborhood. Now, some people won't use cards, and so you'll need to knock on the door and see how they're doing and check that out. If some urgent need arises, however, you can pause that process of putting the area, the report to the bishop from the area captain together and deal with the urgent need by talking to the emergency communications center, operations center, and the specialist in your ward, or calling the bishop. If cell phones are still operational, of course we'd use that. But be careful about the idea that, oh, I'll text or I'll email them or I'll leave them a message on their voicemail. All of that may be non-functional. So learning to use these new communications channels with GMRS and HAM is going to be important to us so that you can, if you come across an urgent situation as an area captain, you can call that into the Emergency Operations Center. And then it's kind of a two-part calling. It's not just, you're doing the reporting part as an area captain, you're going around, you're getting information, you're filling out a report that's available to you in the stake plan there, that goes to the bishop. And then you also are sort of responsible for response. So you're going to coordinate the Emergency Operations Center's response back to those areas as well. And you may be asked to do a number of passes to check through to see how people are doing and give status reports. So maybe more than one sweep of a zone is important. I just think it's important to also keep an idea that those forms probably ought to be adequately with the area captains in paper supplies, just because of the technology problems. And we're all familiar with paper. So extra copies of forms, extra copies of handouts, extra copies of cards are critical. And then fairly frequent involvement and a commitment to them to understand that they're not just, as they do in the drills sometimes, we focus on the response or the reporting. We don't really focus much on the response sometimes. Well, here's who was here and here's who was there, and they were all fine. The reality is when it happens, they'll be also helping us coordinate the responses back to their areas. So important to have the right people in those callings, and that's my thoughts on it. Any questions? Great. Then I will conclude my time, and I believe I'm passing to the Badgers, right?
Hey, Scott, real quick,
Please.
just to clarify, an area captain may or may not be a member of the church. In
Right.
fact, we would be thrilled with anybody that wants to participate. The important part is they just have to want to participate, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think the fourth ward has had some success with that, of getting people from all over the neighborhood, members and not, to participate in this.
I've had a couple of situations going around as an area captain where it was obvious somebody who wasn't of our faith, but was very plugged in the neighborhood, wanted more responsibility, wanted to do something. And well, what can I do to help here? And I didn't really know how to accommodate that. Well, now you know. They can be a volunteer that's an alternate. They can be an area captain. They can work in those callings.
Real quick, the fourth ward, is there someone from the fourth ward who could talk a little bit about how they got non-members to participate in the committee? Maybe there's no one here from that ward.
No, maybe I'll respond to that. We don't have any non-members that are actual members of our committee, but we've had people help and participate in training sessions and that sort of thing. The way that we got it, it took some time, to be honest. We made a concerted attempt to use language in all of our communications with the neighborhood that wasn't church language. You know, we didn't talk about a ward, we talked about a neighborhood, that sort of thing. And over time, many of these less active or non-member folks saw that, you know, this is a real process. You know, we're actually helping prepare the neighborhood. And so they got involved through that process, I guess, if that answers your question.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I have the question. What do those quarterly meetings with the team, the block captains look like if someone's had those?
Yeah, I think we're going to leave that to some things will be obvious. We'll have meetings that will come down to you that will fit into those quarterly meetings. Otherwise, you got to think about, it doesn't have to be a meeting, in fact. It needs to be some kind of an interaction quarter. Send the material or et cetera.
Okay, wonderful.
What
Thank
we
you.
have done in the past is generally there's handouts or classes or some information that we want the area captains to pass out. And so that's one way to interact with them, and that gets them to interact with the neighbors also.
Thank you.
Another opportunity is when you have a drill coming up, which we will have in October again. And just leading up to that, just want to touch base with them, make sure everybody has the cards, the window cards, and you know, those kinds of things. Just conversation about their role over time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's turn time over to Brother Badger, who's going to talk about radio communications.
Thank you, Brother Pettit. Appreciate this opportunity. Barbara and I are both excited to be involved in this activity, and I think it's wonderful that our stake has put all this effort into this plan. And like you, hopefully we'll never have to use it. But one of the first things to go has been said is the communications. And, you know, people are going to call it the 911, nothing's going to happen. People are not there to respond. So our backup plan is to use radios. And I guess that's where I come into the picture this evening. I was interested to find out that I think one of the keys is each ward having a communication specialist. And if your ward doesn't have one, although I noticed on the survey results that 5 out of 9 wards do claim to have a communication specialist, but also I saw another list where there was no information, no contact list at our information at all there. So that's one of the first things I would do is work through the bishopric and the ward council and get a ward communication specialist called if at all possible. And then our state communication specialist can work with them, do some additional training and, you know, get this piece of the puzzle to work. There's really 2 options that we can use. One is ham radio, amateur radio, which means non-commercial basically. And the other is GRMS, General Radio Mobile Service. And our stake has made a decision to go that route, which is a good way to go, I think, for our needs. We're in close proximity, you know, rather limited geography here. So the GMRS radio, I think, is a perfect fit, a good price point, good quality equipment. And I've had this little one. Let's see, right here. Oh, I don't know, I got 4 or 5 different radios now that I've played with, but this is one I bought at Walmart. It has some limitations. It's an entry-level radio. The antenna is fixed on it. You can't remove it. And, but it's very easy to use. Limited range, inexpensive, doesn't use repeaters. That's a disadvantage, I suppose. But that's how folks can get started. It doesn't have a lot of different channels, but you can punch in whatever channel it is you want to talk on, and they work great. Barbara and I have used these for several years now. I think I bought these 8 or 9 years ago, and they've worked great. But I think our stake is more interested in an option like this. I don't know if I can get that in front of the camera. This little Chinese radio, a Baofeng, also quite inexpensive. This is a new one I just picked up. It's an S9, which is approved for GMRS Part 95E certified. And after the meeting, I'm going to run it over to Ron and let him put it through the paces and see what of it. The antenna is removable on this one. That's important because you can go with a longer antenna like this one, quite long, and that will improve the reception and help the radio, you know, with the transmissions. So anyway, a lot of different options there. I'm not sure which GMRS radio our stake is going to go with, but we're going to be working with the ward specialist to learn how to use these radios. And Ron was kind enough to publish a chart and make assignments of the channels. There's like 22 channels. We're using 15 through 22, which allows us to use higher power. And consequently, we'll get better coverage, better reception throughout our stake. Keep in mind that antenna is one of the most critical pieces of the whole thing. I've actually got where I can hook up outside an external antenna, which greatly improves the performance of the radio. But it takes away the mobility of it. And keep the, you know, obstacles like this little radio I showed you at first is supposed to do 35 miles. Well, that's a joke. If you're on top of a mountain, maybe on a clear day in perfect conditions, it might work, but you know, 2 or 3 miles at most is more reasonable. If you're inside a building, structures, especially metal, you know, hills and things block the signal. It's definitely line of sight at these frequencies. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here talking about I mean, ham radio, I guess, is plan B. It opens a whole wide spectrum of other options. You know, a lot more frequencies that you can operate on. Instead of the limitation of 5 to 50 watts with GMRS, ham radio can operate at 1500 watts and lower frequencies. And it's, you know, it's not unusual to communicate around the world. And, you know, I was listening to stations here the other night, you know, all over the country. And so if we need to get out, and then the church has big ham radio stations, you know, and they communicate to the islands. And we are on our mission. We used it a lot to communicate with the missionaries on remote islands. And so it has a place, plus and minuses for both options, but we'll focus on the GMRS for our needs here in our stake. I think it's a good choice, and happy to help any way I can, you know, and getting communication specialists up to speed. And I don't know, any other questions?
That's it.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the net. Ron has a net going. I just saw a message every Sunday at 4:30, and he'll probably talk about this, but if you already have GMRS equipment, I'm sure a lot of you do, you can participate in that net every Sunday, channel 17, sub-channel 12, I believe it is, and he can correct me if I'm wrong there. Also, Jed Petrovich, 87 kg, is our stake communications specialist. He's been conducting, I think it was mentioned in our last stake meeting, and that every Sunday at 5 p.m. for ham radio equipment. And that's been going on, I think, 12 years now. And both Barbara and I have tried to check into both those nets frequently, and everybody's welcome to do that if you want to test out your equipment. And I would encourage you to do that. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
I do have one question. Are you still there?
I am.
Okay, my question is, I looked online at the Baofeng S9, and they had a dual band or a tri-band. And do you know, could you tell us the difference between those?
Yeah, the tri-band radio is, I mean, what they're talking about is 2 meters, 70 centimeter, or, well, let's see, 144 megahertz, 220 megahertz, and 440 megahertz, you know, 3 different frequency bands for the tri-band. Most of what we're going to do is in the VHF, actually in the UHF band, that middle one. GMRS operates from 462 to 467 megahertz, I believe it is. So I'm not sure I totally understood your question. Does that make sense?
I guess I'm saying, my question would be maybe more direct. What one would you suggest we get?
Well, Ron is kind of heading up that piece of the pie and is testing some radios. I think he's got his eye on some particular equipment. In fact, he might talk about that later, but I'd kind of hold that back on that for a bit until, you know, until we get that decision made for sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're just trying to be careful because we don't want to find out 2 months from now that, oh, there's this issue that came up that doesn't make the radios that we suggested the ideal, you know what I mean? So we're actually buying some and testing them rather than relying on information. For instance, the information that you saw, what was it? It was a tri-band, and what was the other?
Dual band.
Well, it was dual band, it was tri-band and something. What 2 terms did you use?
It was tri-band and dual band. It was
Okay.
dual.
Yeah. Now on the S9, that is actually a mistake in the information on that advertisement. It's what is it? It's tri-level on the power. In other words, it's 1 watt, 4 watts, and 8 watts. It's not tri-band. Those S9s are dual band only. So that's why we're trying to be careful, because you can't even depend on some of the information in the advertising to be accurate.
I did
Ron,
Amazon.
is
No.
it safe to say then that we should wait until you set a direction on the equipment?
Yeah.
and Go from
Yeah,
there?
I think we're really close because we've tested quite a few radios. And we probably will tell you you can use more than one kind. It isn't just like one. But we want to make sure.
Brother Banger, you were about to say something and I interrupted. I apologize.
Oh, there you go again, Governor Bangeter, huh?
Oh, sorry.
That's the first
Sorry,
time
Brother Badger. I don't know why I said that.
I've had people come to the door and ask me if I was going to run again.
Years
Yeah, he's no longer with us, unfortunately, but sorry, what was the question?
I cut you off and you were about to say something. And
Oh,
I'm
I-
sure it was profound.
on
Yeah.
Amazon.
Oh, yeah, I got the radio on Amazon, so sometimes the advertising leaves a little bit to desired there, as Ron pointed out.
Ron, when you, can you talk about what is a net? I mean, that may be a new term. We kind of get it, there's some sort of meeting and we check in. But can you just take a minute and say more about what is a net?
Yeah, it's just a time when people talk on the same frequency. And there's a little bit of a protocol. It's either an open net when you can call in, or it's a regulated net where the net administrator, the person running the net, does a roll call. And we've been doing that format most of the time. So it's just a time when we know that we're going to get together and use our radios, basically.
Okay, so the objective is to make a contact. It's a test, right? It's a regular.
Yeah. It tests your ability to set up the right frequency. It tests your equipment. Sometimes we've found, during our nets that people didn't have their antennas screwed in tight. And there's been all kinds of little issues that everybody has had over time. And it's really good because then it exposes you to these issues. And now we know about them, and so everybody knows, and that really helps. It's good not to find out that your battery's dead or that you can't remember the frequency or whatever, during an emergency.
Excuse me, could you please tell us again, it's Sunday at what time and what frequency?
4:30 in the afternoon, and it's going to be 462.6000 megahertz. That's channel 17 with a CTSS code of 12 or 100 hertz. And those are important.
Okay, I didn't understand you said at 4:30 and then you said 462.
0.6000.
0.600. Channel 17, 12.
Yeah, that's so that frequency equals channel 17 on some radios. Just
Okay,
depends on how your radio is set up.
okay. Thank you.
And you can give me a call or a text or something if you have questions prior to Sunday, and we could even do a little test call, make sure you're set up right.
Oh, and we just noticed that's on the handout.
Yeah, it's on page 12.
There's some good links at the bottom of that handout that go into a lot of detail, and there's hundreds of videos out there, YouTube and Google. So we'll have information available.
We will, by the way, be reissuing the emergency response plan because we inadvertently left off the frequencies. We have the channels and sub-channels there, but not the frequencies. So we will reissue that. So the copy that you have now will become obsolete shortly. So, okay, any other questions for Brother and Sister Badger? Okay, Brother Fuller, take her away. He's going to talk about setting up and managing the EOC, Emergency Operations Center.
Okay. Let's see. I need you to give me the host privileges back, I guess. So just click on my picture and then right click.
Yep. I did that, but I don't.
Okay, let's see if I can do that.
Oh,
now.
make host? No,
Yeah.
make host?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. There you go.
Okay. Now, can everybody see my screen here?
Yes,
Oh,
I can.
I'm going to buzz through this really quickly because it's somewhat of a rehash of the meeting we held on the 5th of May. But a couple of people weren't there, so I'll just kind of reiterate some things. The Emergency Operations Center doesn't need to be a big deal. Okay, so don't picture it as, like tables of people, there's 23 people have to work there, that sort of thing. It can be very small, it's very adaptable. You set it up to meet your needs, basically. So why do we bother? We've never had one before and we haven't needed one. Well, it's kind of like fire insurance for your house. Probably haven't needed that either, but it's good to have. Also, it's part of the handbook, the church handbook on emergencies says we're supposed to have outlines, procedures, and assignments made. And the state of Utah plan says good plan to have an EOC set up. Plus, we may be our own first responders here using our own supplies. And so this is a method to be able to respond. So what might happen? Well, I'm just going to go over this very quickly again. This is the state of Utah, the current threat assessment. Pandemic, storm damage, cyber attack, civil unrest, earthquake, planned refugee. And you'd think, well, man, none of this is ever going to happen. We've really been nice. Folks in Colorado last winter probably thought that too until they were burned, had their houses all burned down. Anyway, what does an EOC do? Well, it's there. My first thought was it gets the problem off the bishop's back. We don't, without this EOC, and if there's an emergency, everybody would be saying, well, where's the bishop? Where's the bishop? Where's the stake president? We want to have a team built here that can kind of take over, okay? And the bishop directs us, but then he can minister. So it accepts requests for help. It sends volunteers where it's needed, like Tim said, provides communication, does the reports, and it solves problems. Who works there? Well, pretty much everybody can work there. We're responsible as the emergency preparedness specialists for the Emergency Operations Center. I'm getting it up and working. And then that ward communication specialist, that's really important to have them available too. Outside of that, we could have a volunteer come in. It doesn't matter. Any of these people, area captains, members of the ward, whatever, neighbors. So I've got some assignments. The first assignment is get some help. Make sure that you have a committee. Talk to your bishop and say, it's going to take more than me or me and one other person to do this. And so have a serious talk and get your committee set up. That's your first assignment. So who activates that EOC? Again, the bishop does. Who's responsible? You are. Where is it? Our primary location is our church buildings. Now, assignment number 2, you need to work with a ward council to pick a secondary location. There could arise some situation where we can't use the churches. And so pick another spot that you would set this up. Somebody that's got a biggie garage or a basement or whatever, but it just needs to be another spot. We're in the process of buying these toolboxes. and in the fourth ward, we bought a couple of them. They're pretty good size, but they will hold the information that you need to run the EOC, the forms and the supplies and things. So we're in the process of buying those, and we will deliver those to you, okay? Now, here's your third assignment. Even before you get that case, it is approximately 3 foot long by 2 foot wide by about 2.5 foot tall. You need to find a place to put that. I'm going to look in our ward library. There's a couple of side rooms off in the west building, and see if there's enough room for 3 of these to be stacked for the 3 wards that are there. Since our primary site for an EOC is the church, it makes sense that we store these at the church. But figure that out. Decide where you're going to put this. The supplies that you need are clipboard, papers and pencils, lights, some spare batteries, because you may be operating in the dark. We will buy, what is it, Tim? 58. We've got enough for about 58 vests, the helping hands vests, something like that. So we will buy that and give everyone some vests, scissors, things like that, office supplies. And then there's lots of forms that you're going to need. And we will give you a copy of all of these forms, just like a single copy or 2. And so then it'll be your responsibility to take and make as many copies as you think you need. Things like the area captain report, reports to the bishop, you need those blank forms. And you could probably just make the copies in the library in your church building. Reports to the stake, have some extra ward maps. Then there are blank forms for things like needs. In other words, if there's an emergency, some sort of a catastrophe in the ward and stake, people are going to come and say, I have a need. My basement has water in it, or my roof is damaged, whatever. So those are the people with needs. We have a form for that. We have people that come and say, I want to help. We check out their abilities. There is safety training and release of liability forms. And this is really important. I was talking to some folks for the VOAD group, which is the volunteer organization. I can't remember what VOAD stands for. I think President Goetz probably knows, but anyway, it's volunteer organizations, and they are at the point now where if you don't do the safety training and the release of liability, they won't send you out to help. Doesn't matter. And it only takes a minute. Safety training is 15 sentences they have to read, and that information has been supplied to us by the state of Utah and blessed by the Attorney General, saying, you do this, that counts for safety training. Release of liability is self-explanatory. And then we've got work referral forms. In other words, I come in to volunteer, where am I going to be sent? Well, you write the address and the homeowner and that sort of thing and give it to them and say, yeah, they need help. We have other operational forms that we'll give you, such as job descriptions for every slot in the Emergency Operations Center. We've got table signage that says that this table is reception, this table is for the manager, this table is for comms, whatever. We've got equipment checkout. If you've got equipment that you're lending out for any reason. And we've got security bands to show that people have been vetted. So what does it look like? Well, this is, in worst case, the largest setup where you have a reception table. These are people coming in to the reception area, and they're telling the receptionist why they're there. I have a need, or I want to volunteer. And so the receptionist says, okay, here's a needs form, or here's a volunteer form. Then the person goes over and fills it out, comes back for an interview, and that person would indicate, okay, you have a need. We'll put you on the needs board back here behind. Or if they're a volunteer, you see something up on the needs board that you could help with. And if they say yes, then we can send them over to the assignment table and they get the address and where to go, that sort of thing. So it's a little process. If it's something more akin to, say, our stake drill, maybe you only need 3 people in your EOC. You need a manager, a communications person, and somebody who's available to maybe run out and help or find things. Anyway, as you get more staff involved, we'll be happy to come. And I feel badly. I wanted to set one of these up so that you could actually see it tonight, but with COVID, that kind of took that out.
Hey, Ron, can I interrupt real quick?
Sure,
It's
go
Rob
ahead.
Goetz. Just so everybody's clear, it may only take 3 people, but you need to probably have 6 or 8 or 10 people that know how to work in the EOC, because at any point in time, in the case of an emergency, some may be incapacitated, some may be not present, they're at work or somewhere else. So it's not just the people, the people on this training are helping us get this organized, but they may or may not actually be the people running the AOC or EOC, depending on the circumstances, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. One of the things we've tried to do with EOC, again, by putting job descriptions in the toolbox, is if you've got at least one person who's been trained, they can come in and lay out set up however many tables they want, put the job descriptions on. And if they can talk somebody into helping, somebody comes in and says, I want to volunteer. Well, great. How about if you work here for a while? Here's your job description. It's a single page, read it. That's what I'd like you to do. So we've tried to make it like that, people can just come in off the street and with 5 minutes of discussion, start helping. But again, you want some depth. The other thing that we have tried, and it worked okay in a drill, is to see if we had people scattered out, if it was a virtual EOC. And as long as everybody had a radio, it actually worked. In other words, the communication person doesn't have to co-locate with everybody else. They can be managing radio traffic and finding out what they need to do, and then just contacting the EOC versus via radio. And we can have 2 or 3 people answering questions or going out and being assigned to, if they've got radios too. So it's actually pretty flexible what we can do with it. But communications is just critical. So your assignment number 4 is make sure you've got a good, competent communication specialist. Somebody that, and if they don't know right now, we could train them fairly easily. We're not doing anything that's so technical that it is very hard to pick up. What we need is people with the interest. And you actually need more than one person that's trained. You can have somebody that's a communications specialist by name, but he needs to have some backup people, again, just for this depth. So again, we've got this GMRS radio net that's at 4:30 and the ham radio at 5. Anybody who wants to talk to me about that, let's do it just a little bit before the net, so that we can test out your radio and your connection and be set up. Now we've got a stake drill coming up on Tuesday, October the 4th. And we would like you all to set up your EOC to run this drill. And we also want to run the drill as if communications are down. In other words, the phones are gone. We want to see how everything works with just the radios or runners or however you want to handle it. But just the idea is the phones don't work. And so that's coming up on Tuesday, October the 4th. I know I went through that really fast. And like I said, as you get more people involved in your group and build up your staff, we'll be happy to come and do a training right in the ward on how to set this up and actually practice setting it up. There's nothing like actually doing it. So are there any other questions or any questions at all? I should say. I've put everybody to sleep or shocked you, one or the other.
Hey, Ron, it's Chuck Baggett.
Uh-huh.
Do
Yeah,
you
Chuck.
have that presentation? You did a great job, by the way, a couple weeks ago. That was a great layout. Did you send that out to us? Because if you did, I didn't get it. Or if you didn't, could you send that to us?
I can. In fact, we're
Okay.
building a website, and
Okay.
I'm just about ready to bring that online and
Okay.
make it live. And so we'll
Then
put
don't
it
worry.
on that website.
That'll be great. Thank you. Good information. Thank you so much.
Hey Chuck, by the way, that email or that presentation from both Brother Pettit and Brother Fuller did go out to bishoprics, elders quorum presidencies, and Relief Society presidencies, but I sent that and I neglected to include the ward emergency prep specialist. So my apologies on that.
Hey, great. No, thanks. Thank you.
Ron, one of the things that we've mentioned a couple of times here is communications with the ward council and direction from the ward council. But in our little survey, we see that 5 or 6 of us have never been invited to a ward council meeting. So although you can't invite yourself, you can have the discussion with the bishopric to see if you can get on the calendar on a fairly regular basis or somewhat regular basis to talk about the emergency preparedness needs and direction.
Another thing Bishop Harrison asked our group in the 4th Ward to do, he has a 5th Sunday during the year where we give what would you call it, a status report to the ward, kind of tell everybody where we are and how we've improved or what our situation is for the ward as far as preparedness. So you might talk to your bishop about doing something like that.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Related to that, Ron, as all of you should have seen, I sent out an email to all of the adults in our stake requesting their participation in a survey. It's just to kind of help us get a status of where we think people are at in the stake. I'm curious, Ron, have you got latest numbers on what kind of response has been so far on that?
Yeah, we're about 360 responses.
Okay.
And
we will.
That equates to an average of about, I don't know, 38, not quite 40 in each ward. And then the 8th ward and one other ward, I can't remember which one. It might have had certain, like the 8th ward had 58 responses, I think. So they're quite a bit above everybody else to bring the numbers up.
I responded 25 times just to make that happen. So I had to create 25 different Gmail accounts, but it worked apparently. So
well, it would be good for us to make announcements or send an email or something to the ward to kind of, we have until what, about the 4th of June, I think
that was the cutoff date.
Yeah.
We will tabulate the results not only by stake level, but also by ward, and we will share the results with each ward, both the stake results and the ward results, so that you have a sense for how your ward may or may not differ from the overall stake results. I'll be surprised if any one ward has any significant difference from the overall stake results, though, just given how uniform, for lack of a better term, our stake demographic is.
I had a question about that. I remember seeing the email about taking that survey. Is that the same survey that we took a couple months ago? Or is
it is not. This is separate. So the one we did a couple of months ago was the resource survey that helped us understand what resources we have available in our stake. So to what Brother Pettit talked about, it helped us identify doctors, nurses, communications, like people with special skills or with specialized equipment that we could leverage in the case of an emergency. This survey, and by the way, that was not a one-time event. That needs to be a living document. We need to try and expand our participation in that. because that's one of the ways we assess what we refer to as the Lord's storehouse, what resources we have within our stake. This survey was more generic and it's anonymous. But the purpose is just to get an assessment of where our stake members may stand in their preparation and identify areas where we might provide additional training or encouragement based upon the results of the survey. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
President Goetz, let me just share my screen here really quickly. Can people see that?
Yes.
Okay, so there's the first question. Where's my ward membership? You can see that's the number of responses per ward. I'll just go down through this just to show you real quick. This is the water question. How long could you go with water? You have a way to filter water. No seems to be a fairly popular answer. Anyway, all of the questions, we're getting a fair number of responses, but that's what it looks like so far.
I don't think
Unless-
it'll be surprised. It won't be surprising, really, when we think about it. But I think we are going to find there's a majority of the people that are on the lower end of the preparedness scale from where we would like them to be. Yeah, on certain areas like get home bags and things like that, most people don't have those or use them. Anyway, well, we need to encourage more people to take the survey just to for anything else, it kind of jogs people and they think, oh yeah, I probably ought to be worried about that area. I need to do something about an alternate method of cooking, or water storage.
Well, we've had some great questions. Communications don't stop at the end of this meeting. Just feel free to reach out to Brother and Sister Fuller, who are the stake emergency preparedness specialists, or to Brother Swafford or Brother and Sister Swafford or Brother and Sister Badger, who each have assigned wards. So reach out to them with your questions and we'll try to provide the kind of support that you need. A lot of the support that you're going to need is going to come through that ward council. So make a real effort to make those connections on a regular basis. President Goetz, thank you for being with us. Would you like to share some thoughts? And then after you're done, Brother Chuck Baggett has agreed to give us a benediction.
Thank you, Tim and Ron and everybody else and Scott and Debbie and Brother and Sister Badger. We're grateful for your participation and your support. So we've got a lot to do here. But as a stake presidency, we feel like we've said, we hope we never need this, but we want to be prepared if we do. And so we're just grateful for your efforts and your support in this area. We've got a long way to go, but we've got the right people leading the charge and the right resources that we're developing. So we're very optimistic, excuse me, how this will play out. So thank you again. And that's all I have to add. But we've got somebody's raised their hand. Jim, do you want to?
President Goetz, it's Sister Julia Milburn.
Oh.
I would like to see the results of that survey that you took. How can I get those?
Of the resources survey?
Well, of the stake, the questions that you've been asking people and the responses that you have received that you just briefly showed on the screen.
Yeah, and we will so we're keeping that survey open until June 4th.
Okay.
So we would ask that each ward encourage continued broader participation in that survey. As soon as we get past that, we will share the results and we will share it by ward with each of you. So for the Milburns, you'll know what the seventh ward looks like. We'll also give you what the stake looks like to see if there's any material variation between your ward versus what we see in the overall stake. But yes, you will get those results as well as the ward council.
Oh, great. Thank you. And was that a paper survey or was that an email survey?
That's an email that came out from me. I sent it out late last week, and it's a link to a Google form. There's only 6 or 8 questions on the survey. It's pretty quick to complete. Sounds like, Ron, I will go ahead and send out a reminder probably on Sunday. Send out a reminder statewide.
Okay.
But if you need, Brother Fuller can supply you a link to that survey, and we would encourage you to use your ward resources to get broader participation in that as well. So whether you put it in a bulletin or if you've got a ward blog, or, I don't know that it needs to be announced across the pulpit, but certainly it could be shared in Elders Quorum meeting or Release Society any ways that we can get further or broader participation would be awesome.
Thank you. So just, I'm a little bit foggy. So to clarify that, are you going to, I know that Jim was telling me that he filled that survey out for us, but I'm wondering, are you going to, when you send out your reminder, are you going to send out the survey again, so that I just want to get a copy of that survey and send it to my Relief Society president and maybe the Elders Quorum? They have all of the emails of everybody on in the ward, and I'm thinking that would be a good way to get it out there again if people have not filled that out. And I'm thinking it's coming up soon, so we need to do it quite quickly. Yeah,
the survey that we've sent out is just a hyperlink, so you just click on it and the survey pops up. So Ron, why don't you go ahead and send that out to everybody on this call?
Okay.
And then I will also send out a reminder this weekend. But so look for an email from Brother Fuller and it will have that link in it, and that link can be copied and put into an email or whatever you need to, so that people can take the survey. But it's all electronic. That allows us to quickly tabulate the results and see what the outcome is.
Perfect. Thank you.
Once we get those results, we've had some preliminary discussion about what direction do we go from there. So if there is a need, for example, that we're really deficient on water storage, we know water is essential. We may, we'll discuss, but we may take a position and say, as a stake, we're going to work on water storage and filtration for the next 6 months or year or whatever. We haven't determined that yet, but it might make some sense to choose a direction on a weakness as a stake, and then work together as wards and in concert with each other, talk about how we can do that and how we can get the water to the end of the row, so to speak. So thank you, President. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your counsel, wisdom.